Hello everyone and hello Mom Ruth. I am Mary Rose Javilla and along with me tonight is Miss Anna Rose Denmata. We are going to tackle about the teacher's feedback to improve students' learning. Now make yourselves comfortable while you are learning. Now before I start my discussion, let us know first our learning objectives. First one is to identify the relevance of feedback to students' performance, classify the types of feedback that may be useful in the future classroom, and achieve understanding of how teachers' feedback affects students' performance. Now, without further ado, let us go on now to our main discussion. A teacher or parent can provide corrective information and encouragement. A peer can provide an alternative strategy, a book can provide information to clarify ideas, and a learner can look up the answers to evaluate the correctness of a response. So feedback is a consequence of performance, whether we did good or we need to improve into something, and this is important so that whoever receives such will be encouraged to improve or continue to thrive on where they fail or where they are low or where they are high. Feedback also fills a gap between what is understood and what is aimed to be understood. So filling that gap may be through effective processes such as increased effort, motivation, or engagement. Alternatively, the gap may be reduced through a number of different cognitive processes, including restructuring understandings, confirming to students that they are correct or incorrect, indicating that more information is available or needed, pointing to directions students could pursue, and or indicating alternative strategies to understand particular information. And all of these are under feedback. Effective teaching not only involves imparting information and understandings to students or providing constructive tasks, environments, and learning, but also involves assessing and evaluating students' understanding of this information so that the next teaching act can be matched to the present understanding of the students. And this second act is the feedback part, and it relates to the three major questions in the model of feedback. So the first question, where am I going? How am I going? And where to next? So these three questions address the dimensions of feed up, feedback, and feed forward. An ideal environment or experience occurs when both teachers and students seek answers to these questions. But what I have observed too often, teachers limit students' opportunities to receive information about their performance in relation to any of these questions by assuming that responsibility for students and not considering the learning possibilities for them. Now, for the first question, where am I going? So a critical aspect of feedback is the information given to students and their teachers about the attainment of learning goals related to the task or performance. These goals can be wide-ranging and include items such as singing a song, running a race, noting beauty in a painting, sanding a piece of wood, or riding a bicycle. Goals as to what type or level of performance is to be attained so that they can direct and evaluate their actions and efforts accordingly. Feedbacks allows them to set reasonable goals and to track their performance in relation to their goals, so that adjustments in efforts, directions, and even strategy can be made as needed. And teachers and students are committed to these goals. A clearer understanding of the criteria for success is likely to be shared. And goals are more effective when students share a commitment to attaining them because they are more likely to seek and receive feedback. To put it simply, this first question allows us to set our goals. Okay, now let's move on to the next question. How am I going? By answering this question, it involves a teacher or a peer, task, and especially self, providing information relative to a task or a performance goal, often in relation to some expected standard, to prior performance, and or to success or failed on a specific part of the task. And students often seek information about how they are going, although they may not always welcome the answers. And too often, attention to this question leads to assessment or testing, whereas this is not the fundamental conception underlying this question. However, Tests are but one method used by teachers and students to address this question. Now in your sheets, I want you to ask yourselves, how am I going in my learning process, and am I progressing? In order for you to answer the next question, where to next? So this question can be addressed by providing information that leaves greater possibilities for learning. These may include enhanced challenges, more self-regulation over the learning process, more strategies and processes to work on the tasks, deeper understanding, and more information of what is and what is not understood. Now these three questions, where am I going, how am I going, and where to next, are a fundamental part of learning progress. Now I have found 4 levels of focus of feedback. They are the feedback about the task, the FT, about the processing of the task, the FP, and about self-regulation, the FR, and about the self as a person, the FS. Of course, these 4 levels have distinctions. First, feedback can be about the task or product, such as whether work is correct or incorrect. This level of feedback may include directions to acquire more, different, or correct information, such as you need to include more about the Treaty of Paris in this writing. If students lack necessary knowledge, further instruction is more powerful in this level. This also includes feedback about how well a task is being accomplished or performed, such as distinguishing correct from incorrect answers, acquiring more or different information, and building more surface knowledge. Now, the second feedback can be aimed at the process used to create a product or complete a task. This kind of feedback is more directly aimed at the processing of information or learning processes requiring understanding or completing the task. For example, a teacher or peer may say to a learner, "You need to edit this piece of writing by attending to the descriptors you have used so the reader is able to understand the nuances of your meaning." So it relates to student strategies for error detection, thus providing oneself with feedback. Such errors may indicate failure or a need to re-strategize, to choose different strategies, to be more effective in applying strategies, or to seek help. Whether students engage in error correction strategies, following error detection depends on their motivation to continue to pursue the goal or to reduce the gap between current knowledge and the goal. For instance, we may say, this page may make more sense if you use the strategies we talked about earlier or we have discussed about earlier. Now, FP is more specific to the processes underlying tasks or relating and extending tasks. Such feedback concerns information about relations in the environment, relations perceived by a person, and relations between the environment and a person's perceptions. Now, feedback at the process level is more effective than at the task level because it is enhancing deeper learning and it focuses on the process. Now, the third feedback to students can be focused at the self-regulation level. This includes greater skill in self-evaluation or confidence to engage further on a task. For example, you already know the key features of the opening of an argument. Check to see whether you have incorporated them in your first paragraph. This feedback can have major influence on self-efficacy, self-regulatory proficiencies, and self-beliefs about students as learners, such that the students are encouraged or informed about how to better and more effortlessly continue on the task. Now, self-regulation involves an interplay between commitment, control, and confidence. It addresses the way students monitor, direct, and regulate actions toward the learning goal. It implies autonomy, self-control, self-direction, and self-discipline. Such regulation involves self-generated thoughts, feelings, and actions that are planned and cyclically adapted to attain the personal goals. For the fourth feedback, this feedback can be personal in the sense that it is directed to the self, which is too often unrelated to performance on the task. Examples of such feedback include, "You're a great student. That's an intelligent response. Well done." Personal feedback such as "good girl" or "great effort" typically expresses positive and sometimes negative evaluations and affects about the student. It is important, however, to distinguish between praise that directs attention away from the task to the self, because such praise has low information value to the achievement and learning, and praise directed to the effort, self-regulation, and engagement or processes relating to the task and its performance. Example, Gracia, "You're really great because you have diligently completed this task by applying this concept." So this latter type of praise can assist in enhancing self-efficacy and thus can be converted by students back into impact on the task, and hence the effects are much greater than just saying "good girl" or "you did a good job" without explaining how or why they did a good job, or how did they attain that praise. So it's very important that we have to be specific in order for students to self-evaluate, in order for them to know where they need to improve or what they have to follow in order to improve their performance or their task. So feedback is information provided by an agent, example Gracia, like teacher, peer, book, and parent and experience. So regarding aspects of one's performance or understanding. And it occurs typically after instruction that seeks to provide knowledge and skills or to develop particular attitudes. Feedback has also a model, which we call model feedback, and this identifies three major feedback questions: the where am I going, how am I going, and where to next. And there are also 4 levels of which feedback is focused: feedback about the task process, self-regulation, and self as a person. And using the 4 levels and 3 questions, the thorny feedback issues will be untangled by Ms. Denwada, which will be tackled as well by Ms. Denwada. And once again, I am Mary Rose Tavilla. Thank you for listening and good night.